This video is sponsored by Unity Alfa Romeo. Well, folks, it's dark early, well, the sun is rising, but it's an early enough start. This is my last drive of my 2023 Alfa Giulia Quadrifoglio. Had it just about a year now, and in my last video I kind of talked about the reasons why I might want to sell the Alfa. I tentatively advertised it. At least 3 people were tripping over themselves to buy the car at the full asking price. So it goes to show, if a car is spec'd properly with some unusual options and a great colour and some low mileage and some good photographs, then it will sell. Got to jump into the car now. I'll talk you through the reasons as to why I decided, but more importantly, 5 years of ownership with Alfa Giulia Quadrifoglio of one type or another. Was it a good experience? Would I do it again? Well, let's find out. I'm Ed. Today's backroad hero is the Alfa Giulia Quadrifoglio. So firstly, I have to say that the whole experience with the Giulia Q has been, on balance, a really, really positive one. I've had an awesome time with the car. I've gone to some great events, but more importantly, I've met some wonderful people along the way. I've learned so much about this car, and it was the car that launched the channel 5 years ago. Can you believe that? How many YouTube channels do you know, or YouTubers, are still on their first car? Well, that's what I've done here, but I'm not a regular YouTuber, I suppose. I do this part-time, purely for the fun of it, sharing the cars with you and my own personal experiences. And so many of you have bumped into me at shows or sent a message or written a comment to say that watching my videos convinced them to pull the trigger on the Alfa Giulia, and it's wonderful for me. It's very touching to think that I have been on that journey with you, or somewhat responsible for your choice. As a daily driver, this car is perfectly good. If you want luxury, go and buy a 7 Series or Citroen C6 if you want to be a bit quirky. I've had 2 of those. But in general, there's the Jekyll and Hyde nature of this car that makes it so wonderful as your only car. 4 seats or 5 seats in the 2018 Models Plus. Soft suspension, or the bumpy road button, as Harry would call it. But turn the dial into dynamic, or even race mode, and it shows a completely different side of its character. So you can have one car, one shoe does fit all. Okay, maybe the commuting side is a little compromised compared to the best luxury barges, but you know what? It's perfectly good for a super saloon, which is kind of what this is, anything north of 500 horsepower. So that takes me on to the other thing. The engine here in the Alfa sets itself apart from the kind of Maserati Nettuno and the California T engine, of which they are kind of cousins, in the fact that it's got a second ECU for the purposes of cylinder deactivation. Shuts down the right bank, becomes a 3-cylinder engine, and you notice the fuel economy kind of gauge climb towards certainly over 40 miles to the gallon anyway. And on the commute, on long journeys, if you really want to, you can dial it back, drive it like you're driving Miss Daisy, and maximize that if you need to stretch things. But let's get back to the 510 odd horsepower that this thing has. It's way too much for the road, all bar the little squirt off the lights here and there. At the end of it all, if you're enjoying this car to its full potential, it's really into license losing territory by the time you feel the back end squirreling around. As Jay Leno said, it's more fun to drive a slow car fast than a fast car slow, and I discussed that in my last video. I'm replacing this, by the way, by an Italian convertible with a lot of fun. I'm not going to name it just yet. You're going to have to wait till the next video to find out. Maybe with my ad hoc posting, you want to subscribe to see that. But in the meantime, drop a little comment down there. Let me know what you think I have bought. Italian drop top, eh? Just for the summer, because it's June after all. So that's the overwhelmingly positive side of things. It hasn't been that expensive to run. In my video, This Car Will Ruin You, or This Alfa Will Ruin You, I explained that it's not the running costs. You've got to bite the bullet off the kind of 4-year auxiliary belt service, which in some places are charging over $2,000 for the privilege. However, you can mitigate that certainly in the UK by taking out a 2-year service plan as such for about £1,500 or thereabouts. That covers 2 services, and if you buy it right in year 3, it will cover the year 3 oil service and the year 4 auxiliary belt service as well. So that's a way of fixing costs somewhat. Why pay more than you need to? So if you're wondering, that looks very much like the Maldives, Ed, you'd be absolutely correct. Here, unshaven and on holiday, and editing this lovely video for you all to see. I just wanted to break it up a little bit and say thank you to Unity Alfa Romeo in Oxford, who sponsor the content on this car. Without them, I would have been unable to bridge the gap price-wise into the 2023 car. It was their ex-demonstrator that I bought. My relationship, though, with them goes all the way back 5 years ago when I picked up my 2017 car, the blue one. They were carrying out the servicing work, they were fixing it as and when, and thank you to Liam and Josh in the workshop for the sterling work that they do. The sales team as well were rather kind and generous as to the trade-in price that I got for my 2017 car. Without them, I would have been unable to go ahead with the purchase of the new car. So, a year in, I'm eternally thankful for their sponsorship, but my relationship with Unity is not over. It's within their remit to service my new car. Have you put in the comments what you think it is yet? If that's not a reason to hit the old notification bell as to the new content in the new car that I'm going to make, it's a metric by which I can tell if you actually like the stuff that I do. Subscriber count, while it's not the ultimate goal for me, enables me to go to some of the manufacturers for some of the press cars in order to do various bits and pieces for them. A thing I have been unable to do up until now, because a mere 10,000 subscribers in, it's just really not possible to stand out from the crowd for people asking to get those cars. So 85% of you are unsubscribed to the channel. If you like what I do, want to say a thank you, at least hit that little bell and we can grow the channel together. Back to past Ed for continuation of the final drive of my 2023 Alfa Giulia Quadrifoglio. So it's not the running costs. Why am I selling this car? Well, when you think about it, I got my driving license at 17. I might have a usable kind of performance car experience up to 67 before the insurance costs just go through the roof. So there's 50 years of motoring. Now, I'm considerably further down the line than maybe some of you out there. But in 50 years of driving, do I really want to commit myself to essentially one car for more than 5 years? That's 10%. If I did that and only had one car to drive, I'd be 10 cars in a driving life. And that's not something I want to do. I want to experience lots of facets of motoring. You know, I'm very lucky that I've got quite a few cars, classics and otherwise. But it's nice. A change is as good as a rest, I think. And I'm kind of happy to sell this car to its lucky second real owner, Andrew, who just happens to be down in Cornwall. He's already got an Alfa Giulia Veloce, and you know what? He's going to keep it. So he's going to have an Alfa Giulia for the commute and daily use, and then he's going to have the quad standing by for those special trips at the weekends or whatever. So best of luck to you, Andrew. It's a beautiful car, this one. Someone described it in a message to me as unicorn spec when they were kind of tumbling over themselves to try and be first through the door with the deposit. So I always like to see a car go to a good home, as it were. I'm, fanatical about these things. I've got overmats on the overmats. I've got a boot liner in here. Nothing has ever touched the carbon fiber inside here. I keep my nails short so I don't scrape anything like the steering wheel and the leather. And even with the steering wheel, I've run it with mostly a cover on it so that my little disc lock doesn't ruin the leather or the Alcantara in this case. So I sound as if I regret selling it. Well, I don't, because I'm looking forward to the future. I'm looking forward to something different. I also said I was struggling to make content with this car. I've covered everything from changing the battery to upgrades to all sorts of things. This is kind of 30 videos in on the same car, and you kind of struggle a little bit, or I am, coming up with ideas. I put some stripes on it with a futile effort of making a little difference, bringing you some content just for the sake of it. So to answer the question, do I regret selling it? Well, time will tell. Do I regret buying it? Absolutely not. This has been a fantastic experience, mostly a positive. Couple of little niggles with the 2017 car. It let me down with a gearbox, and it was basically a wiring feed to the gearbox, the positive feed to that, and that was easily resolved. It let me down with start relays, which is why I always keep an extra couple in the glove box just in case. I also keep a little bolt that screws into the gearbox, so if anything there is at fault, you can't fire the car up and release it into neutral for towing or for putting on a flatbed, then I've got that in there as well. So little things. Modifications that I did that I'm really, really happy with. One was the Squadra, twofold. One to lower the splitter for being able to clean it. And secondly, for full exhaust control through the little trigger. And that's it. I have never used any of the other facilities, the launch control or the timer to 60. I'm not really interested in nonsense like that. Time's been nothing to me. I put a little USB in the center armrest for wireless Apple CarPlay, something that even to this day, as far as I know, the Giulia does not have. Why on earth would a manufacturer give you a kind of a charging pad and no remote Apple CarPlay? Anyway, that's neither here nor there. Would I do it again? Yeah, if I was in my original position, I would certainly do it again. I love the full self-driving on this, or it's not quite full self-driving, but it's certainly lane keep assist and radar cruise, which I'm using right now. And especially on a long commute early in the morning when you've been up all night, in my case, getting off those flights, having been, 10 hours, sometimes even 15 hours back from Tokyo, it can be really, really knackering on the system. And to have this sort of facility has been kind of life-saving, I would presume. Do I regret going for a car with carbon seats? No, I don't actually. They're comfortable, they're different, they're rare. And in fact, I was able to achieve the asking price for this car simply because of the options on it. The carbon spark goes in the exposed carbon roof, of course. If you see a painted roof in a car after 2020, it's steel. And in itself, there are corrosion issues with that. So a steel roof with an aluminium surrounds will get to similar metals, and you start seeing them corrode. That classic kind of potential differences. It sets up a small voltage between the dissimilar metals and starts to corrode, normally the aluminium panel. So that's kind of it for there. The earlier cars, of course, were carbon roofs, but they were painted, so you didn't really see the advantage of that. So that was the two options on this car that really made a difference for the sale. So let's talk about the elephant in the room with these cars. And as with any new car, it's depreciation. Now, I thought both cars that I have bought fairly well. As with all things, it's not what you sell a car for that matters, it's what you buy it for in the first place. You only realize the profit or loss, as it is in this case, when you actually sell. We all buy these cars knowing full well that they're going to depreciate to a certain extent. However, there is some good value these days. I always said in my very first video that I saw the car kind of tending towards 25 grand. And that's kind of what's happened, almost to the penny. In the trade, certainly they're selling for mid-20s. And they're certainly, retail-wise, it's looking like about 30, 31 grand. My blue car had 42,000 miles on it. They offered me 25,000 as a trade-in, and I had paid 3 years previous 41,000 for that. So, you know what? There's 16,000 over 3 years, a little over 5 grand a year depreciation. This car, however, 2023, bought it as an ex-demo. The shop floor price new was over 85 grand. It sat in the showroom for 6 months. They knocked it down to 75 grand. 2 days before I bought the car, they dropped it from 75 down to 60,000 pounds. So there is 25 grand over the space of less than 18 months and 5,000 miles. And that's at a dealership. Can you imagine the position you'd be in if you'd bought one of these cars new? Now, I sold this car for 57,000 minus the cost of a service. I paid 60 grand for it. So in fairness now, £3,500 over 5,000 miles in a year. That was probably okay, I have to say. It's still a few quid out of your pocket, but it could have been much, much worse. Had it been a standard specification car, I would probably be looking at a further £7,000-8,000 depreciation. So I'd be looking in around the 50 grand mark for this car's retail. Those carbon sparkos and the carbon roof and the driver assist pack and the colour and the mileage and everything else, turning this into a not necessarily depreciating beater, but certainly much less than it would have been. So the moral of the story is be prepared for depreciation on these cars. And it's not unique. Someone suggested to me that I lease a car. I should have leased it, but it matters not because you're limited on mileage. And really all you're doing in leasing a car is paying for the depreciation monthly. In this case, I'm paying for the depreciation at the point of sale and realizing an actual amount. Where a lease, you are guaranteeing the depreciation and you're financing it as you go. So it really matters not at the end of the day. With a balloon payment, you're either going to get more than that or you're not. That's the way life is. I've kind of been used to buying my cars outright and not having to worry too much about depreciation, since most of the cars that I've bought have been effectively depreciation proof, having bought them. And the sweet spot for me is somewhere between 8 and 10 years. They're an old car, they're not yet a bona fide classic. You can't get classic insurance on them, and that's what they are. They're just old cars. They've fallen out of favour. They're slower than their new replacements. I suppose that is the cost of high performance motoring. You got to get your head around that. You got to be happy with that. So whilst I've enjoyed the experience and the ownership, seeing a car not moving outside the front door and knowing it's decreasing in value doesn't necessarily sit well with me. I have to say, get a well-maintained one, a few years old, and some limited mileage, and they are out there. Pay about £32,000 or £33,000. Know full well that you're probably over the next 10 years going to lose about 6-7 grand on it. Well, you'll find once they stop making these cars, which is imminent by the way, you may well find that this is the perfect time to buy a well-depreciated Giulia Quadrifoglio. So we'll get the car down to Andrew. I'm going to enjoy my last drive in the Quadrifoglio. I hope you've enjoyed the content that I've made with it. I've enjoyed making it. And whilst this is the end of one journey, it's the start of another one. Life's too short for boring cars, as a friend of mine would say. And that's it. It's time to move it on, go and enjoy something else for a little while. But most importantly, it's not what you drive, it's what you do in them. It's the people you share those memories with that ultimately matters. What you drive doesn't. This has been a totally fantastic experience for me, and it's because of you all watching that gives me the incentive to go and make more memories. So turn the telly off and go and make some memories yourself. Thanks for watching. Please leave a comment, subscribe if you haven't already, and all that other nonsense, and I'll see you in the next one.